Hello, everybody. Greetings to all. Welcome to the Snooker Hall podcast. I'm Dan Murren. My guest today can shed light on a number of aspects of snooker, the super competitive nature of the Q Tour this season, and also what it's like being a player who grew up overseas but has based himself in the United Kingdom to pursue a career as a snooker player. I'm delighted to welcome the Tomahawk, Ryan Thomerson, to the Snooker Hall podcast. Thanks for joining me.
No worries, mate.
What can you tell us about yourself, about your snooker journey?
Australian player, but moved to Australia when I was 11, and that's when I sort of picked up the game. Been playing now, so I'm 30, so I've been playing 19 years, and yeah, started the game. Sort of just went into a snooker and pool hall in Melbourne with my dad, and sort of just picked it up really. I used to do other sports in England. I used to do motocross racing when I was younger, but that sort of wasn't on the cards when I moved to Australia with the family. So snooker was sort of like an easy one to pick up, not expensive to start, and yeah, that's sort of how it all began. And now, sort of basing myself out of England and trying to get back on the tour, which I fell off end of last season.
But snooker's a bit safer than motorsport as well, right?
It is. I did have a bike. I did have a bike for a while back home until I was about 18, 19. But then trying to ride, and if you do sort of fall off, I did have like a small like fall off, and I sort of realised that it just wasn't something that I could be doing at the same time as trying to play snooker. So I haven't rode for a long time.
And what other sports are you into?
Um, I don't not really massive into loads of sports. I like watching the Formula One when it's on. I do a bit of running with my partner. But other than that, don't really have any sports that I'm into.
But your snooker journey, when was the first time you remember being exposed to snooker, either on TV or in person?
When I was I started when I was 11, and then like started playing all like junior tournaments and stuff. And then when I was 14, I was playing the Australian Under 15 Championships, and that weekend Neil had just won the World Championships because that was 2010, and he actually travelled back. So he won that in May, and then travelled back home to Australia around the June, July time, and that's when I can always remember that the Australian Championships used to be played, and he was doing an exhibition. It's called the Eureka Tower in Melbourne. It's actually like the highest building in the Southern Hemisphere, and he actually did an exhibition with a few juniors and some other players on the 88th floor. They put a table up there, and I actually managed to be picked as one of the players that got to play a frame with him. So I got to meet him then, and that was sort of like I think that was sort of like my first sort of look into like knowing players and playing against someone like that. And then I think a year later, that was when the Goldfields had a 3-year contract from with World Snooker in Bendigo. And
That's right.
I got very close to getting a wild card into that. It was just through results in Melbourne, and I was 15 or 16, and I lost in the quarterfinals 3-2 to Matthew Bolton from Western Australia. And I think if I got to the semis of that one, I was guaranteed in because they based it off of the best results for Melbourne-based players and a couple of other players. But yeah, unlucky to not get that. But other than that, I used to go watch the Goldfields, and then started travelling to IBSF World Under 21 Championships when I was 15, 16 overseas, and I did that every year until I was too old to play in them, and also did the IBSF men's and the teams, and then just every now and then I would come over to England for say like a 2-month spell, and then stay with Neil, and then I travel back to try and play the tournaments there, just trying to get a bit of experience playing over here against the better players.
So Neil would put you up at his place, or?
Yeah, I was good friends at the time with Vinny Calabrese, who's a very good player from Australia. Was on tour Yeah, I was 17, 18, so that was about 12 years ago that Vinny was sort of first got on tour. And Neil was actually away at the time playing in Thailand and Hong Kong. And I'd went and saw Vinny for a week. Vinny asked me just to come over for a week, do some practice, and I was meant to stay a week. Neil ended up coming home from Thailand, where he was, or Hong Kong, and it ended up being 4 months that I stayed at the house with them. It was just me, Neil, and uh, Vinny at the time. It was quite a long time ago now. It was like 14 years ago. But yeah, it was. Yeah, you can't beat just playing against Vinny, Neil all the time. Neil was great. He always put me up. And then I stayed for the 4 months, went back home to Australia, and then every year I'd usually come over for a couple of months and just stay with Neil, go to tournaments with Neil, and then just practice with Neil. Because at the time I didn't qualify for the tour or anything like that, so I didn't have any tournaments to play in while I was here. But just to get the practice was the main reason for coming.
But this is, I mean, everyone always says that Neil Robertson's a really nice bloke, and I suppose this is just more evidence. It's a bit sickening, really. Like, he's good at what he does, and he's a nice bloke. It's
Yeah,
but
I
yeah, no,
can't.
it's more
I
evidence.
can never. I could never fault Neil for anything because he has played a massive. I mean, obviously, I've got on tour and I didn't have the 2 years that I wanted to have, but in terms of me getting to where I am now, it's like it wouldn't have been possible without like all the help that Neil's given me, and I still can use his table. So it's in Cambridge. So I, without that, I wouldn't be able to be anywhere near like what I am now, or even had the chance of getting on tour because it's just too hard. It for an overseas player, it is literally too hard to. Well, speaking from Australia point of view, anyway. Obviously, other countries have academies and a lot more exposure, but Australia is like I've found it like so hard. Just even just being away from family, I can't just nip over to Europe and see family. It is literally like a 30 hour round trip. Like well one way 30 hours and then coming back 30 hours by the time you've got home and whatever. So it's just I have found it a bit hard in the more recent years being away, but yeah, it's what you got to do, I guess.
No, well, speaking of other sports, I'm a big rugby fan, and one of the rugby podcasts I listen to, they're both, well, two hosts, they're British lads, but one of them moved out to Australia. But he came back to London for a conference. It was a 3 day conference, but he had to fly, and it's
Yeah.
actually in Melbourne as well. But he flew from Melbourne, did his connection in Dubai, and then to London, 3 days, and then back again. And
Yeah, it's brutal.
yeah, he said I might as well not have been there. I was just a zombie for the first 2 days. It was
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is hard. I mean, when I used to come over and stay with Neil, it always used to be sort of quite close to the Asia Pacific. So at the time, it was called the Oceania Championships, which would always have a tour card. Um, and it was about, God, I think there was about 4 years, 4 or 5 years in a row where I'd come to Neil's and I'd travel back home to Australia. Like I used to do, I used to get there like a week before, and it used to all at the time mostly it was played in Sydney, and I'd come back a week before, and I'd lose in the quarters or semi-finals or last 16 1 year, and then I would literally turn up to the tournament, and I'd just be so tired, and so the year I actually sort of thought, no, I'll go there 2 weeks before, practice there 2 weeks, and I ended up winning it, and I actually haven't played in it since because of being on tour, but. I think 2 weeks is sort of the sweet spot. If you can get 2 weeks, that's a sweet spot, really, of getting over your jet lag. Like, it doesn't matter when I come back here, but sort of going there, I find it very hard with the jet lag, especially when you've got to play snooker as well.
going
Uh,
going east is worse, absolutely, without question.
yeah,
For me, anyway.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I think
I've
we're the
been.
same.
I used to travel around to Australia, like everywhere, every state. I've been playing tournaments, even going to Perth. Like at certain points of the year, that's 3 or 4 hours time difference to Melbourne, and even that, like it doesn't matter where you go. 1 or 2 hours is nothing really, but when you're sort of getting like 4 to 6, 7 hours like time difference, you can't unless you're a snooker player. trying to play snooker, like people won't understand like how hard it is to play snooker when you're tired. I don't really think there's anything worse than doing snooker when you're tired,
Oh,
especially under the
yeah.
lights. The World Snooker light, the lighting and everything, it is very hard.
The intensity. I get well, the intensity of focus. The
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I suppose most people just can't even imagine it. It's.
it's a hard one. It's a
I
hard one
bet.
to imagine until you're actually doing it.
But you mentioned so Neil has been a massive support to you. Who else has kind of guided you and given you support and been a mentor for you over the years?
Obviously, Neil's sort of like the main one, really. I had some help along the way, just from with other friends. Um, Obviously, my dad's played a huge part because he obviously played the game for so long. Um, but I haven't really had any coaches or anything like that. It's sort of just been me. Like my partner's played a massive part in just being able to like let me play basically, and she really like is like a massive supporter of me. Um, yeah, not like friends that have supported me, like being able to go to tournaments and stuff. Um, but in terms of like players, it's Neil has like been the biggest for me.
That's fair enough. Yeah. And so moving from, so you played in a lot of junior events, but then moving to being having this as a career. How big a step up is that in terms of quality
Um,
of opponent, intensity of matches? Like how
yeah, I mean, I I sort of like was coming to England for the couple of months on and off that like I used to sort of get better because at the time I was okay, but I wasn't really seeing much improvement. And that at that time, that was when I stopped sort of having the junior tournaments that I could play in. Um, I my best couple of results in the world under 21s was like I made quarters. I lost to Hossein 6-4 in Dubai one year um, when I was 20, and that was sort of like my best result since going from a young junior to an older junior. And then after that, I think it when was I? So I had come to England. I was about 20, 22, 23 when I sort of got better. And in Australia, I'd actually won. I started winning ranking events. I think I won six in 2 years. But I'd won at the time of coming over to England. So since playing since being in England, 2017, I got runner up in a big tournament, and then I won the South Pacific, I won the Australian Open, and I won a Reventon Classic all back to back. And that was sort of when I left. I left 2 days after this Reventon um, tournament, and I actually haven't played a ranking event in Australia ever since in 2017. So then I'd flown over to England. I was on a high. Basically came over here for a few months, and I went back to Australia in February because that was when the Oceania was on. But I ended up losing. I think I lost in the semi-finals that year, and from then on, it was just a big slog. Really, I was playing over here, wasn't on tour, and then I think it was about a year later that was when I got on tour and won the Asia Pacific. And then the jump up from that, again getting on tour, I think I'm in pretty good stead and where my game is. Just a huge struggle. Um, just couldn't really match, and I struggled on the conditions, and I still sort of do. Like yesterday was sort of clear for me that playing on playing on conditions like the tour, it's very hard, and the players that are playing on the conditions all day in day out, I think my game it's getting there, but the jump is just huge. Like the pressure, just everything in general, it's a huge jump up from amateur. I didn't think it was as big, but it is.
and in terms of
There's
sorry.
yeah. No, I was just going to say, it's just these days it's more about the depth of it. Players are good, but there's just loads of players that are good now. So that's where it's sort of I've seen the change from even just in 2017 when I sort of first sort of stayed here. That's where I've seen the jump really. It's not necessarily like a small amount of players have got good. It's just more players have got good.
Yeah. So the depth of the tour, and pundits will say this all the time. Analysts will say that the depth of the tour is so much better than it's ever been. And
Yeah, definitely. But I think it's for the amateur game as well. Like,
yeah,
if you look at, I think for myself anyway, like I can know there's an improvement for me because I've never done well on the Challenge Tour or the Q Tour, but this is the first year where I've played every tournament, and obviously I think I'm sixth at the moment, so I'm in the playoffs. But if you look at the rankings on that Q Tour and you go through each player, like there are bloody good players. Even if you look at, say, like I think the top 30 is sort of like very good players. You can't. There's not. Obviously, I know you've got like Xing Tong on it at the moment, but there's a lot of good players. You're not going to every tournament thinking, oh, there's this person's going to win it or this one. That's it. There are multiple people that can win events and a lot more people that can do damage, basically.
and well, in terms of qualification, the winner of the season is granted a WST 2 year
Yeah.
card, I believe. And then
Yep.
how does the rest of the qualification work?
So yeah, you've got the number one that gets an automatic card, and then the next 16 play off against. So they play off against 8 players which have qualified through the Q Tour Global, which is 2 players from Asia Pacific, 2 players from the American one. I think there's 2 in the Middle East one. Uh, yeah, there's 8 players basically, and then they basically seed the players from. I don't know how. I actually haven't been in it before, but they seed the top 3, and then there's like the next ones are all seeded, but you've got 8, 8, and 8. So you've got 3 groups of 8, which makes 24 players, and you've basically got quarter semis final. So whoever wins that section gets a tour spot. So out of 8 players, there'll be one person that gets through. Then the next 8, and then the next 8. And I think it's played alongside the European Championships, which is in March. And I think I hear that it's being played in Turkey this year in March. It goes for 3 days. I think it's best of 11, best of 19, best of 19. I think the matches. So they're proper matches. They're all ref. Yeah, it's going to be good. It's every player's capable of winning it though. Just because you've got number one after the 7 events, or like number 2 after the 7 events, doesn't mean you're going to go on and win it. Because last year, I think Ashley Carty won it when it was in Doddington, and I don't think he finished number 2.
But it's possible for someone to finish number 17 and still qualify.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's a good it's a good way of doing it. I think the way the Q Tour events are run, I think just in general the way they are and the chances that you've got, it's definitely the best thing that World Snooker, well, WPBSA are the ones that run it. It's definitely the best pathway I think for a tour under the tour that they've done ever, really. I know they used to have the Challenge Tour, but this is 7 events. Everyone's got a chance. I think what's hard for me is I start off in the first round, so I start off in the last 512. Whereas if you finish top 32 on the Q School list, you automatically go into the last 64. There's 48 players there's 48 players that get seeded through to the Saturday morning to play in the last 64. So there's 16 players that have to play through Thursday, Friday to get onto that Saturday. So, like, just say for instance, the one I did well in, which was the first event in Northern in Leeds, there was 166 players. So 48 players are seeded. The other 120 have to play off for 16 spots. So I got through all of that, and then I lost the final 4-3. But I think that's the toughest thing about it. But in terms of a pathway to get on tour, that's the best way.
And well, speaking of that final in Leeds, you were facing Andres Petrov. I mean,
Yep.
he's someone who's been on tour as well, and I mean, he's a good player. He's been
Yeah,
on this
very.
podcast. Yeah, he's a good player,
Yeah,
nice
no,
player.
very, very good player. Well, he's from Estonia.
Mm.
Yeah, he was on tour the last 2 years, the same time as me, and had. I mean, he had a better 2 years than I did. But yeah, I was sort of going into that match confident and like I was playing well. I just played well 2 matches that day because you play the last 16 onwards. But so I'd actually played 3 matches that day. So and I had 3 good wins. Umit Dikme, I had Stephen Hallworth and Ryan Davies, and then I was going to the final confident, and Pedroff like just came out the gates firing. Really, I think if you look at the break board, he had like I think he won 4-3. He was 3-0 up. And I lost 4-3. I actually made a 70 to go 4-all, and the last frame he potted a great long ball and made 100 on me. Can't. You look at his break board. I think he had 5 breaks over 50 with 2 centuries, and I've lost 4-3. So I can't. You can't. If a player plays like that, you can't really do anything. So it is a shame. Like it would have been nice to have won the event. And there's a lot of things that sort of come from winning Q Tour events, including the UK, including the World Championships. There's usually wild cards into that. So it was a shame not to win it, but at the time I didn't even know about wild cards or anything like that. So I think I would have preferred that to be like that, carrying it forward. But yeah, no, good event though. And from then on, the Q tours have been in Bulgaria, Sweden, Manchester was a couple of weeks last week. Didn't do very well in that, but then you've got Austria coming up in 3 weeks.
If a player knocks in an amazing pot and just clears up, there's not really much you can do about it. But you can't practice for that. I mean, it's.
No, that's right.
But in terms of practice routines, what do you do? Do you prefer practicing? You said you practice with Neil Robertson, Vinny Calabrese. Do you
Um,
like solo practice, or do you like playing with
I
someone to hone your
I was
skill?
always a bit of on and off with how I like doing my solo, but I have recently really sort of enjoyed doing solo, and I can sort of do 4 or 5 hours on my own and be happy doing that. And I do certain routines that can sort of put you under pressure, um, just certain lineups, long balls and safety. Um, and still obviously have games with people. I've quite a few games with Stephen Hallworth.
Yep,
Um,
he's a friend of the
I
podcast.
have I've played him quite a lot recently in his club in Lincoln, where he plays. Still play Neil. I played Neil actually on Tuesday. Yeah, this week Tuesday. No, sorry, I played Neil on Friday. So yeah, I play Neil's like the one that I sort of play more when he's about, but so he's obviously goes a lot deeper in the tournament, so he's a lot busier. But other than that, I I tend not. There's not really many players around in Cambridgeshire, which is a bit of a shame. Um, they're all sort of up north. I think Stephen's probably like the closest to me in Lincoln. That's about an hour and 45 minutes. Um, but everyone else is up north, Sheffield way, with the academies and stuff. But yeah, no, practice it's been a bit disappointing with the result yesterday because practice the last couple of weeks has been very good. I've been changed a few things up and very good, but then yeah, it's sort of disappointing yesterday.
Question I like to ask every proper player who comes onto the show: what is the most outrageous fluke you have seen, whether it was in your favour or your opponent
Well, I mean, I've had
did it?
quite a few myself, but God, the one I can sort of remember was I was feeling good on the day, and it's actually on the World Snooker's Instagram page. Jack Lazowski had a brown against me, where I had him in trouble. He's gotten out of the snooker. I only needed the brown, I think it was, or brown and blue, and he needed them all to clear up to win the frame. And he's got out of this snooker, and it was absolutely outrageous. It is on Instagram, WST's Instagram. So but it was in Llandudno in the Welsh Open last season before. That was like the one I can sort of remember the most.
And does it matter to you if a player, sort of raises their hand as an apology? Is that important to you? I know for some people it's
To be
not.
honest, I'm not really bothered. Like, I don't always say sorry myself because at the end of the day, it just happens. I know it's like a nice gesture, so I sort of do it more than what I used to. I don't know. I think just with age, whereas like when I was younger, I just sort of like, I don't care.
You
Is
meant
what
that,
it is.
yeah.
Like, yeah, like no, just don't care. I'm not going to bother saying sorry because it's not as if like what you're going to do, like let them come back to the table instead. So it doesn't really matter. So I do sort of tend to say, like put my hand up. I don't say anything, but I just put my hand up now, and yeah, can't really do much about a fluke though, can you?
No, it's true. And I've always said a fluke is
It
only worth it
happens.
if you capitalise on it. So
Yeah, exactly,
it's
exactly.
what are your objectives for the rest of the season? What would success
Um,
look like for you this season?
this season's success. I mean, the goal obviously at the start of the season, like I've had a close friend of mine help me being able to make the Q Tour happen anyway, because originally I wasn't even going to be playing the Q Tour just because of the expenses and stuff like that. And then some friends have helped me massively to be able to make it possible. So before then, obviously top 16 of the Q Tour was the goal, just to make sure that I was in the playoffs. Um, Obviously, it would have been nice to be. It would still be nice to be number one after it. So I have a few good events in the Q Tour, being number one, and you automatically qualify. But getting back on tour for next season is obviously the main goal. And at the moment, I've qualified for the playoffs already, so I can sort of relax on that way, knowing that I've already done that. So I know I'm a step closer. Um, yeah, but getting back on tour and just sort of, I don't know, just really sort of settling down when I'm in matches on tour and really start to get some wins and move forward. Don't want to be stagnant where I am currently. So it's going in the right direction though. Everything, like personally at the moment, everything's great. So I'm in the right space.
And just a couple of general questions before I let you go.
Yeah.
Are there any rules that you would change in snooker? The big ones at the moment that are in discussion among snooker fans are the shot clock and ball in hand after a foul and a miss. What do you think about these rules, or is there
I'm just
anything else that you would change?
I'm just old fashioned and I just prefer everything the way it is, to be honest.
Fair enough.
Like that's my own view on it. Like the foul and the miss, it's been in snooker since I can remember anyway, and like it happens for both players. It's been a massive talking point back home at the moment, um, because there was like the Australian Open's last frame. Everyone thinks that it shouldn't have been decided basically on a foul and a miss, and that's sort of what happened. But if the other player's in the other foot, then they're going to do the same thing. It's easy to say that you wouldn't put something back or it shouldn't be a foul and a miss if you're the one in the chair waiting. If you're not the player at the table, like it's easy to say that, but at the end of the day, it's just that's the rules. And would you really want to watch? Would you really think that putting no foul and a miss or making it ball in hand, I think you'll actually lose a lot of snooker fans because that's what people also like seeing. It's the drama, like, and I just think that if you sort of start changing them rules, I just think it's not going to be snooker anymore.
Slippery slope. It's
Very slippery slope. Like obviously the shootout's great to have like the ball in hand and stuff, and it's good drama and whatever. But and in the I know in the six reds you've got four foul and misses, and then the next one is ball in hand. So you've got it in like six reds, and you've got it in the shootout, and shot clocks in the shootout as well. But it tends like snooker is watched massively already, and like the fans are just getting bigger, like more and more. So obviously that shows you that they're liking the way it is at the moment anyway. So why would you then go and sort of flip it on its head and potentially lose fans?
And you mentioned the shootout. I mean, I guess you're a fan of it. I'm a fan of it. I think it's a great tournament. I don't like this idea that it's a lottery. I don't like that idea at all. You need to be a good player to, even get through one round of it.
Yeah, it's a very good tournament. It's great fun. I mean, I struggled in it the last 2 years when I was in it. Last season was both times I've had massive chances in the ball, like not massive chances in the balls, but I've had two chances in the balls to do something, and I've just couldn't handle it. I was just pressure for me. It was just it was just different. But I think in terms of like people watching it, it's great drama, isn't it? So I think it's
it
good for
is.
the game.
No,
You've got to have something to mix it up within the season. But would people want to watch a shootout like one tournament every 2 weeks, like what it is on tour at the moment? I don't think people would, but every now and then, it's like the 2020 in cricket. It's well supported when it's on. It's on once. It's got its like space in the calendar, but Test cricket is what people want to watch. So
yeah,
that's that's
yeah.
sport, really, isn't it?
No, yeah, I agree. And Test cricket. Yeah, that's where the big boys play. You might say
Yeah,
it's no, that's where the good becomes the great in terms of
yeah,
reputation
that's
as
right.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, well, obviously, you're British born, but you grew up in Australia, or your snooker development happened mostly in Australia. What do you think of the future of snooker in Australia?
snooker in Australia. It's obviously there's not the depth of players what that you have here. That's so in Australia. There is like a small group of players that sort of always win everything. It's always been like that. There was more players about 15, 20 years ago back home playing, but nowadays there is a smaller minority of players that do win mostly everything, and I don't think that we have as good a junior circuit as what we used to as well. But in terms of tournaments, the way the tournaments are run, the conditions, the amount of tournaments there are, like I don't think there's a better circuit for snooker in the world, to be honest, because we always have like 10 ranking events a year. There's also other tournaments. The tables are reclothed. There's referees. Yes, you have to ref a few rounds yourself, but there's always going to be refs for like the later stages of tournaments, or like the Sunday where it's like last 16 onwards, similar to the Q Tour. But the money's great. It's like I think it's like £3,000 um, for a winner of an event, and there's 10 of them a year. Like I don't think. I think it's in great shape for tournaments. It's just a shame that obviously players, it's not a depth of players. But the tournaments currently have been really well supported. Sydney's massive for snooker, so you do get a lot of players in the Sydney tournaments. Melbourne's started to increase now, so I think it's heading in the right direction. I think just need some more juniors to play, really, which is the case. Which is the case everywhere, anyway. I think. I don't. I know there's like the junior circuit over here is is on, but again, there's not as many juniors as what there used to be.
Yeah. No, I spoke to John Hunter, the head of Q Stars,
Yeah,
recently.
yeah,
That episode will be out very soon. And for him, one of the big problems was, just getting kids involved. And the more kids you get involved, the more chance you've got of finding someone who is good enough and is willing to work hard enough. So it's a numbers game,
yeah.
like everything
It's
really.
it's also it's also obviously the parents like like do they like snooker? If parents don't like snooker, they're not going to take their kids to a snooker and pool hall. So it's also like up to the parents. It's not just like a kid being like, oh, I want to play snooker, and the parents being like, okay, yep, let's play. Like I went to a school. I think it wasn't last. It was 2 seasons ago. I went just to a school in Essex in Brentwood with Neil, and just to like talk to the kids. And it was like a little mini table set up from World Snooker. I think there was about 20 kids, and they all loved it. And we were playing like little mini frames with the kids. Like it's on YouTube and stuff. And it was a great day out to see all the kids. Kids loved it. But at the end of it, like the kids will go home and like even if just one person wanted to play and started playing, that's great. But the parents have got to want them, have got to want to take them and stuff. So that's like it's like me. Like my dad took me to the snooker and pool hall, but he was always involved in snooker in England. So like he enjoys that. That's what he still plays now. And same with like Neil's dad. He at the time was had owned like a snooker hall in Melbourne. So that's how Neil's gotten into it and playing. And if you most parents that of snooker players nowadays, like they all enjoy watching the snooker mostly, or the ones back in the day always used to enjoy snooker. So nowadays, parents don't really want to sit in a dark snooker room with no windows. So
Yeah.
it is very hard to get kids. I, I would love to. I want to help, obviously, Australia to try and get more juniors. It is just, it's one of those things. It's very tough to get them though.
Ryan, I want to say thank you for your time.
No
I've
worries.
a lot of insight on this kind of thing. The overseas game, or overseas based, or players who were based overseas, it does fly under the radar. And thanks for sharing
No worries.
experiences, and good luck in Vienna in the next event.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
And you're always welcome to go back anytime and speak to me again.
Thank you, mate. Yep. No worries.
Thank you to Ryan Thomerson for sharing his stories with us on the Snooker Hall podcast. A wonderful guest, really nice bloke, and he's welcome back anytime. The perspective of a player who has moved across the world to pursue an ambition is one that I feel doesn't always get the attention it deserves. The image Ryan put in my head of performing on the 88th floor of a building, though, that would cause a bit of vertigo for me. I certainly wouldn't be able to play good snooker at that height. I struggle to play good snooker at any altitude, really, but that's a story for another time. Thank you for checking out the podcast. Thank you for listening, and thank you to everyone who has supported this podcast since it started. I'm so grateful to the snooker community for embracing this show. It really means a lot, and if we can share some knowledge about all aspects of snooker, then something good has come from it. A 5-star review and some kind words on Apple Podcasts and a 5-star rating on Spotify would help more snooker fans find this show. Keep your emails coming. The address is contactus@thesnookerhall.com. You can follow the show on X, Instagram, and on Blue Sky. The handle is, for all platforms, @thesnookerhall. I'll be back next week with another episode of the Snooker Hall podcast. Stay warm, and until next time, take care.